Hey Libra, we're back at it again under the cover of night. Showing up for your reading after a very long shift at work. I'm very tired, and I feel like that can work to my benefit because I feel connected to spirit in a way that sort of bypasses my filtration system that's usually in place when I'm very bright and awake. So bear with me if I seem a little bit slower. It's just because I'm tired. It's been a long day. But I think it's going to work in our benefit for this reading here. I've actually already laid a couple of cards on the table because I was trying to connect with y'all off camera. And the very first card that came through is Weyolot, which is basically the Ace of Hearts. And I love that in this particular deck, which if you don't already know, is the Taro Yoali Ehikat by Mi Corazón Mexica. I love their work. I love their artwork. I love this deck. It's one of my favorites. Go check them out if you don't already know about them. But anyway, I love that in this depiction of the great heart, Weyolot, that you have this heart here, not only spewing blood, but occupying a very central position in the imagery. And you have these directional colors and these directional day signs, which I won't get into like the specifics of that stuff right now, unless it's like relevant to the rest of the reading. But what I like about the fact that this was the first card that came through is it sort of illustrates to me this process of centering yourself in your life in a way that dismantles attachments to energetic outpourings that weren't in your benefit. And what I mean when I say that is it's maybe a little bit cliche, but cutting off relationships with people who really served no beneficial purpose in your life. And there's a little bit more confirmation on that I'll get to in a second, but coming to terms with the fact that there are some people who are in your life to teach you things, and there are some people who are in your life to suck the life out of you and give nothing back, or give very little in return. And there's a sort of auditing process that seems to be taking place. You're diverting the flow of energy. You're damming certain streams, certain currents that had otherwise been left open and flowing in order to maintain a level of personal resource within yourself that can better be utilized where you feel it is more effective. Now, this auditing process, I feel, is only confirmed by Tekpasiwat here, the Lady of Flint. Now, this to me, obviously this is the suit of air. It's the suit of your sign, Libra, also Gemini and Aquarius. But there's a certain coldness and detachment that's afforded the air signs by virtue of your being very cerebral in nature, very much more intellectual, more rational, more conceptual with how you go about processing the world around you. And it allows you to be a little bit more objective than maybe, especially water signs, because you're able to see from a higher, more flighty, less dense, less bogged down perspective. I almost feel like this is like the architect kind of looking over a city plan and recognizing where certain roads or canals are kind of leading into places that don't make sense, and where maybe expanding certain roads in certain portions can work in your benefit because it's going to help to channel the flow of energy in specific places as opposed to just kind of spreading things out too thin. So going back to kind of what I was saying of closing off certain energetic attachments, can also be maybe specific work projects, or even I see also with this Huitlamacasqui, this high priest, el sumo sacerdote. You know, it's kind of sad. I've said before, but Spanish is technically my first language. But it also isn't. You know, Spaniards came later. Anyway. Yeah, this card to me, you know, on the one hand is communicating the appearance of a certain figure in your life who maybe can take on a teaching role for you. But I think it also has to do with this sort of auditing process. Like this can be not necessarily an outer figure that's offering guidance, but maybe an inner guidance and an inner authority that's sort of recognizing where the appropriate flows should be going. I don't know what this attachment that I'm having to this idea of like diverting channels and flows of energy. Like I'm seeing it very it's very watery in my mind, but also kind of like I'm seeing like the branching of the different streams sort of offshooting from the river, and this very deliberate, like, I'm gonna close off these smaller streams that are just draining from the larger flow so that more energy is able to go down this particular central canal or whatever you however you will, leading you towards a specific goal that maybe you didn't otherwise have the time or the space or the energy for because there was just too much going on, taking on too many projects. I see also this process of leaving behind a specific career path and instead pursuing schooling or training or the pursuit of knowledge. It doesn't necessarily have to be you going to school or going to learn something in a formal way, although I feel like with this particular card there is a certain formality to it. There's a certain inheritance of tradition, of very clearly defined and delineated processes in order to attain a certain level of proficiency within a specific path or of study, and it doesn't necessarily have to be religious in nature or even spiritual, but what isn't really? I just feel like there's very much a redirection taking place, like especially with this Weyolok, this central fulcrum point, the heart at the center of the body, the heart at the center of the four directions. The fifth direction is the center. You know, this maybe this process of sort of identifying within yourself and for yourself where your cardinal directions are, where your foundational pursuits need to be, where your focuses need to be, like whether that's with your family, you know, just learning basic time management, you know, that can be part of this process. I don't want to get bogged down in that, so we're going to move on to the next cards, and then we'll kind of maybe tie everything together. So the next card, we have Chalchu Siwak. This is the Lady of Jade, Queen of Pentacles, if you will. The earth element, very practical, very much involved in the activities of the world, and especially involved in outer appearances, bodily nourishment, bodily movement, bodily sensation. this is somebody who's very accomplished in those fields, if you will. And I feel like it's very antithetical to this tekbasiwat. So it could be that there is, and the way the cards are laid out, and I didn't do this intentionally, with Lamakaski, the high priest is above this card, and I'm connecting that back to what I was saying earlier about maybe somebody approaching you, somebody coming into your life that's occupying a role of a teacher. And maybe this person has something to teach you about grounding yourself within your body, as opposed to being very heady and cerebral and intellectual and very lost in your thoughts and jumping around with concepts, because these things are very flighty. They change moment to moment, and it's probably a universal human experience that thoughts just kind of come and arise in your attention out of nowhere, and they can be completely antithetical to anything that you feel yourself to be, or how you feel like your natural propensities would even allow you to think, but they just sort of come up as like foreign alien concepts within your attention. That's kind of how the mind works. Like, it's just constantly jumping, firing ideas out, and playing with concepts and twisting things around, and just like, it's just a constant noise machine. And this sort of helps ground that. And it's like, you can have all these ideas and these concepts, but until you really define for yourself what their concrete form is and how their lasting impact on the world around you, they're sort of useless. Not useless isn't the right word, but I think some of you may know what I'm trying to get at. It's like these things are flighty, ephemeral noise until you bring them down into bodily, real-world manifestation. And I feel like this person, or this maybe even aspect of yourself that's sort of coming or arising within your experience, is going to help you define the process of doing so that you're not just like floating around in this soup of thought and noise and ideas. And again, you're having the flow of energy sort of pouring in every which direction and branching off into these weird little dead-end offshoots, siphoning precious time, energy, and resources, real-world fiscal resources even, or just more cerebral or creative or emotional resources. And I feel like that concept again is very confirmed right here by this Four of Jade card right here, which is about this process of stabilizing, of holding, of maintaining and retaining precious resources. With this particular card, it's like a very three-dimensional sort of resource, but I think it also just very perfectly and succinctly rounds up the entire concept that we've been talking about through this reading here, of needing to gather your resources together, of closing yourself from the siphons, the siphonophores that want to take everything from you. And I'm kind of laughing because it also kind of seems like it's a little dramatic to put it that way. It might very well be that way, but it's also not that serious, or at least it doesn't have to be that serious. Like, I think there's a certain medicine that air signs have, and that's a flightiness. It's a playfulness. It's an ability to dance from experience to experience without getting bogged down by feelings. And I think it's important to, in the process of me saying that, also recognize that, feelings are valid and they are important and they are data for you, data-driven air signs out there to sort of process your experience and learn from it, and also, interface with the other beings around you. But I think this card is also showing up because it's also a newfound experience of emotion within you in a way that I feel is much more healthy and much more true and much more grounded, practical, objective. Like it's checking all the boxes. And whether or not it's been an experience triggered by a certain approach of a figure in your life, or whether it's sort of been a natural consequence of the direction that you've been going in and the experiences that you've been having, I can't say. You can sort of determine what's true in your case. Now the last card, which is basically the equivalent of the Magician. Let's see if I can say it. Tetlatla Maniliki. Tetlatla Maniliki. El Nawal. Interesting. That's basically like the Magician. Sort of this person acting as a fulcrum within the interfacing four elements, the spiritual, material, intellectual worlds, and how they sort of are bridged within yourself. But it also, I think, to me, is a rather strange card. Not least because of the imagery. It just sort of reminds me of Loteria. I don't know if any of my Hispanic brothers and sisters out there, I'm sure y'all remember playing Loteria with some dried beans or something. But yeah, this card just really distracts me with that because that's all I can think of when I see it. But maybe that's also kind of important because it's this idea of identifying certain concepts and determining which ones apply to you, which ones you have access to, which ones you maybe want to have access to that you don't really have the correct board on the table to access. And so maybe it kind of comes down to, if the current board that you have in front of you doesn't have the relationships that you want, the career opportunities that you want, the intellectual pursuits, the studies that you're passionate about, the ideas that you want to expose yourself to, if you feel like you don't have access to that right now, then change the board. And whether that means moving to a new location, for those of you that's the reality for, because all the gods know it's rough out there right now, and I don't know how realistic that moving to a new location is for a lot of us. I say as I've just moved just a few months ago, but you pay for it. But it could also just be, like, again, kind of going back to, I think, what I mentioned earlier in the reading, is this process of leaving a certain career path, maybe because it's sort of putting you in an environment that doesn't align with your base values. You're working with people that you, I don't want to say dislike, but that you don't really vibe with. They don't see the world in anywhere near the same way that you do. If you're watching this video and you're watching these readings, like, you're obviously the type of person to kind of think very spiritually, very metaphysically about reality, and maybe these people you're kind of surrounding yourself with in this environment, on this old board, so to speak, it's not a part of their world at all. It's foreign, it's weird, it's valueless, it's a game, it has no reality to it. Everything is numbers and concepts to them, whereas to you, maybe everything's more realistic in that it's fluid, like reality is. So it's kind of interesting. Tekbasiwak, this lady of flint, this lady of air, who is very much this more objective and rational person, while still recognizing that there is a sacred element to reality. She's sitting on the moon, the crescent moon. This is the Nawa symbol of the moon, or at least one of them. And then, of course, you have the moon in the background there, actually in the sky. But she's surrounded by different day signs, Mikitsli. I'm thinking of the Quiche name, Tihash. I forget what it is. Tekpat in Nahuatl. Flint. Malinali, which I think is or Eb in the Maya calendar. She's surrounded with these sacred images. She's attuned to the sacred nature of reality, of the world around her, while also being very objective and calculating and practical, and very much in the rational sphere, if you will. I'm gonna get bogged down in this. Let's see. Let's try to let's try to round this off a little bit. I feel like I want to pull a couple more cards. So, hi. Oh, okay. Well, Omeyolot. This is the Two of Hearts. Interesting. Okay, well, this kind of, I guess, reinforces, or it can reinforce, there's a couple different ways we can interpret this, but one of the ways is it can reinforce a certain approach of an outside figure coming into your life. Maybe this sort of teacher, this sensual, bodily, embodied, practical, real world, grounding person who's going to help teach you how to guard your precious resources, or at least maybe even create with you a space within which you can both nurture one another and provide space for this process of realignment. But it's like a shared process. Like I think I'm going to say something that might contradict what I think a lot of spiritually minded people like to say, and that's this need to be independent and to be totally comfortable with being by yourself and being detached from relationships with other people. And there's a certain truth to that, like having the strength and the capability to be present with yourself and to appreciate yourself and to not need or rely on other people for anything. But I think it's taken to an extreme, especially in our current era, in that people feel the need to be very closed off from one another, to completely lack any element of community, to not even know how to sustain, how to create, or how to maintain interpersonal relationships beyond anything superficial. And so this card to me is communicating this need to, yes, obviously be appreciative of yourself, be strong in yourself, be aware of your own capabilities, but also recognize that life is so much easier and so much better when you have someone else to share it with, someone else who wants to move in the same direction as you. And it doesn't have to be romantic, it can be friendship, it can be a family member, however it may look. It's like creating a community begins with you and one other person. And sometimes even just those two, just the two of you, that's enough to create something together, to learn together, to grow together. Maybe I'm also seeing very specifically, because these two cards are together, like the two of you going off and traveling to another country in order to be exposed to a certain teacher, or to be exposed to certain experiences that teach you guys things. But it's very interesting. It's sort of like a pilgrimage type energy of approaching a holy person, a priest or a guru, a spiritual master. And it's like before you met this person, you didn't have anybody else with which you felt like you could even imagine this process with. And now it's like the two of you are going to do it together. Like, what a complete 180 from your previous circumstances. And I think it all came about because you changed the board that you were playing with. Going back to this card. You have the power to change your circumstances, even if it's in incremental what's the word I'm looking for? Incremental steps. I don't know. Y'all, I'm tired. Trying to think if there's something else that wants to come through. I feel like for the most part I've touched on the basic framework of what's coming through. Obviously interpret it as you will. Don't try to make things fit that don't resonate with you, but also don't discount something just because I explained it in a way that maybe doesn't immediately make sense to you. Maybe the medicine will come later and you'll be thinking about something I said sparked or planted the seed for in your brain. Or maybe not, whatever. But there's medicine in anything if you are receptive to it. All right. Well, platitudes aside, I think I think that's all I've got for you right now, Libra. And I hope to revisit you guys soon. I do apologize for the lengthy breaks in between the readings I've been putting out lately. It has been very difficult for me to find a work-life balance, which accounts for my friends, my personal relationships, my personal projects, of which I have so many, this YouTube channel, the time that I have to completely turn my brain off and just not do anything, and then the very structured, rigorous, I have to get up at this time to show up for my job, and I come home at this time and have only this much time before I have to go to bed to start the whole thing over. I think a lot of you know exactly what that's like and have been doing it for a long time. And I've been doing it for a long time too, but man, it's already old. I'm ready for the board to change. Oh. Huh. I feel like this card's for me. I'll show it to you, but I'm not going to say anything about it. 3 of Jade, 3 of Pentacles. Work on those goddamn projects. Those things you've been putting off that you really want to do but don't have the time or energy for. You can make time. Prioritize. Talking to myself with that one, huh? Anyway, love y'all. Take care.